Hi and welcome to this lesson where I will teach you how you can scale and multiply the result that we got from the last lesson, so we have many tiles instead of just one. We will use those later on to smoothen the tile out and get correct edges and so on, but to really see the result we should have more than one. So let's start directly. How should we do to multiply this? Well, if we start thinking what we have here as a base, then it's the texture coordinate where we have the UV, and the UV is a range from 0 to 1 where we have a 0 down here and we have a 1 up here in the right corner. So if I increase that to 2, would that change anything? Would it be like another one up here? Well, we can easily see if that will happen. So I take this one, I just press Shift D for copy, and I multiply it with 2 because then it should be twice as big. And what happens now is that we get our little tile here, which is 0 to 1 up here. And then the rest is not filled in because we have not calculated with that. We don't have any space for it. It's just blank right now. So it didn't work really well, but we got a tile of the right proportions. So we should have a tile that is this big, but we should have a tile here and here and here as well. So when we come this far, how should we then do so we get this tile again? Well, the most easiest thing is to do this once more. So we get 0 to 1 here, but we also get 0 to 1 here, and we get 0 to 1 here, and 0 to 1 here. So like a repetitive pattern in some way. And there is two ways to do that. One way is to use something called frac. And frac is, I can take it so you can see, it's a converter, and in the converter you can see here we have the vector math. So I take up the vector math, and in that one you can see in the, I think it should be there, it's called fraction. So in the right section in the middle you have fraction, so you select that one. And what it does is that if a value comes in here, you get the decimal rest out here. So if I put in 0.5, you get out 0.5. But if I put in 1.5, you still get out 0.5. And if I put in 1.3, you get out 0.3. So you keep the decimal part and you take away the number that is the integer part. And that we can use because this is almost 0 to 0.999. So if we then get 1.1, it will be 0.1 here again. And then in the end it will be 0.999. So we could use that to make this happen over and over and again. So first we multiply with 2, we get the right proportions, and then we put in the fraction here, and suddenly everything works because now we have this 2 times because we have 0 to 2, but we divide it, or we use the fraction here. So now we get 0 to 1 here as well, or 0 to 0.999 because the fraction is not completely 1, it's always a decimal. So it's the same all those 4 places. So we can just change this to 3 here and 3 here, and then we get 3 tiles in that direction and 3 tiles in that direction, since fraction make us repeat this pattern like from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, all over again like this. So that is the normal way to do it. And the multiply here, then you have to change in both way. If you're really lazy, you can use another node that will do exactly the same thing but a little bit easier, and that is called scale. So if you use scale, it is the same as multiplying x and y with the same value. It's just that you have to fill it into one simple value instead of using two. So use scale if you don't want to use the multiply, if you want it to be squared. Of course, you would like it to be rectangular, and then of course you also need to use multiply, because then you perhaps would like have 1.5 or 2 in that direction and 3 in that direction, and then you don't get a square, you get a rectangular instead, because you can change these individually. But if both of these should be the same, then just use scale, because it's rather simple to use like that. But you start with that, then you divide it, and then it will be exactly the same as taking it from the UV here, but so many times that you put into the scale here. So then you get it 3 times here, and you do all the multiplication and math, whatever you have done here, 3 times, which means that the result will be 3 times 3 tiles that you can use here. So that is one way of doing it. Another way to do it is to use the modulo. A modulo is also a way to do repetitive patterns, and I will go through that later on in another lesson in more depth, but I can show you just how it will work here. So if I change this into modulo, which you can find right below fraction, then you can let the UV go in here, and you can then divide the UV into small parts using the modulo. What it does, if you're talking math, is that it keeps the reminder of a division, and you can think of the result like, I don't know, like a clock. So if you have 1 to 12 and you send in 1, you get out 1. If you send in 2, you get out 2. But if you send in 14, then you go in like first 12 rounds, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 12. Then you have a rest of 2. So those 2 will be the result out. It will be 2 out. It's just going round and round and round for the number you put in here. So it will be repetitive way to do stuff. But now, right now, you can just think of it like something that splits the UV in the amount you put here. If you like divide it with 1, I will show you, it's easier to see. But if I put like this, then you divide it, the UV, by 10. So I get 10 small pieces here. But as you can see, they are not exactly as we expect. And that is because the maximum result out here is the number that you put in here. So now we don't get 0 to 1 out here. We only get 0 to 0.1 out here. So the result here is too small for us to use in this case. So we need to multiply this value until we get 0 to 1 out here. The easiest way to solve this is to have an input. So if I press Shift A and select input and select value here, we say that we put in 10 here. Then we can just take this 10 and divide it by 1, and then we get this result. So we just drag out here and select divide. So you have normal, not vector math, just math, because we only have 1 input here. We don't have 3 or 4 numbers, just 1. And we put that into the bottom, and we put 1 in the top. So 1 divided by 10 will be 0.1, which it's exactly what we have here. Now you can see this is gray and this is blue. Should we do everything correct, then we should send in this only for the top 2. So here we need some combine here. So we press Shift A and then we go to converter and we select combine XYZ, which will take all our values that are scalar or single values, and we would like to use it for X and Y, and then we just put it into the modulo here. That will be exactly the same as we had before, but we now can use this to multiply after the modulo. So if I just take away the scale here and I take and multiply it with this, then you can see that my tiles now changed so we can recognize them again. And we can now control it very simple using the value here. So this is the second way how to change one simple tile into many. So either way you can use the fraction or you can use the modulo. Those two are always a way to do repetitive patterns. And of course there are small differences between them, but right now you can just remember that fraction or modulo will divide it. And if you use modulo, it will not be from 0 to 1, it will be 0 to whatever you put in here. So if you put in 0.1, it will only be up to 0.1 out here. And then you of course need to divide, and after that multiply, and I use scale because it's easier to use than having to put it into two numbers. So this is how you do the edges, and in the next lesson we should soften these and make these more like real tiles that you have on a kitchen wall or something like that. So see you in the next lesson, and I say bye for now.